So my name is Erwin McManus, and because the introduction is probably the least important part of this whole time, we just cut that so we can worship a little longer and maybe dig into the scriptures for a few moments more. I get to be a part of this beautiful community in LA called Mosaic. And so many times when I'm there, I have to sort of take a deep breath and remind myself there was a time where we imagined something like our community, but it only existed in our dreams. And I love that stage in life where you are, because you may not realize it, but you are at the very least an incubator of the future. That right now, while you're here and while you're learning and developing and growing and processing data and downloading information, taking classes, taking input, reading books, listening to lectures, what's happening is you're downloading material that is feeding your soul, your imagination, and your imagination right now is an incubator for the future, and the world's best future may live inside of someone's imagination who's here today. And for me, that's exciting, to know that human beings have this unique relationship with the future that sometimes we underestimate. I used to write a lot of books, and then I stopped. About 6 years ago, I went dark. And I stopped doing things that I used to do all the time, like write books and speak at events and have a public forum. And then I actually made a shift and went into the fashion industry and the film industry and into some other business endeavors. And my wife, Kim, kept coming back to me and saying, you need to write a book, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And I didn't. And then one day I had, you ever have one of those moments you realize, oh, I should do something else? And that was the day when I lost like $5 or $6 million company and watched everything I had disappear. And I thought, I should probably reconsider where I'm going and what's going to happen in my life. And in the midst of all that turmoil, I began to put together some thoughts and decided to write a book. And my wife, Kim, came up to me in the living room. She saw me starting. She goes, I'm so glad you're writing a book. What are you writing about? And at that time, it was not called The Artisan Soul. It was just called Artisan. And I said, I'm writing a book called Artisan. And she looked at me and said, you're a genius. I don't know how I had the privilege of marrying you. Every time you open your mouth, something extraordinary comes out. That's what she should have said. That's not really what she said. That's how I heard it. That's how I translated what she said. What she actually said is, great, a book for people like you. What about people like me? Now that really made me mad. Because if you know my wife, Kim, I am cardboard and she is color. There is just no way anyone could know both of us and think of me as the creative person. She is an explosion of imagination and creativity and beauty. And in fact, when I met her, her heroes were Carol Burnett and Lucille Ball, and she was a comedian, and I went bowling with her. That's how badly I wanted to marry her. I went bowling with her, and I was committed deeply to the relationship. And it was bad enough we were bowling, and we're bowling with her friends who actually had bowling shoes, which made me very nervous. Why does anybody buy bowling shoes? But anyway, and she starts miming down the alley. And she's absolutely unaware or indifferent to how everyone is perceiving this moment, and I'm a little more socially shy and awkward, and she's miming down the bowling alley, and mimes are terrifying anyway. And you add bowling to that, and I thought, I gotta marry this girl. She's fearless. But then 30 years later, she's telling me, what about people like me? She had put herself in a category where she was not a creative. She was not an artist. There are people who are creative and people who are talented and people who have these unique gifts, but she decided that her role was to spectate and to observe and to celebrate that, but not to be that. And when she said that, I knew exactly why this was an important conversation. I said, I'm writing this book because there are people like you who've believed the lie that you are less while others are more. Who've believed a lie that has stolen from you the essence of what it means to be human. And we need to reclaim that inside of every human being. Part of that for me was a journey in a different community. I don't know if you've ever heard of TED, but TED is this community that stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And I was looking for a place where I felt like I belonged and could connect, and I thought that, and I knew the church was supposed to be that, but sometimes, let's be honest, it's not, right? And when I found this particular community through a friend of mine named Dan Goods, who's an artist and like some kind of savant, and it was before it was public, and before they put the TED Talks on the web. He said, you got to get into this community. The greatest thinkers in the world come together and share their newest ideas. And it's like an incubator of genius and innovation. And then I discovered it was very private and very exclusive, and you have to apply and get accepted. So I applied and was not accepted. And I applied again, it was not accepted again. And so I applied a little bit more, and it's okay, I'm used to rejection. I used to date, I know what that's like. You just sort of keep coming. You don't want to be a stalker, but you want to, be persistent. And so I became a TED stalker. You're going to date me one day. You're going to realize that we need to be together. But she did not understand that. And so finally I saw this advertisement that said there was going to be a TED Global in Arusha, Tanzania. I thought, I'm going to apply to that one. I have a suspicion that there'll be fewer people going to Arusha, Tanzania than Montecito, California. And maybe I can get in there. So I applied to Africa because, you see, I'm Latino. I'm an immigrant from El Salvador. English was my second language. And if you know anything about Latinos, you can lock your front door, but we'll just go around, find a loose window, and we'll find our way in, and we're gonna go to the kitchen, we'll cook a meal. You're welcome to come and enjoy that with us. And I thought, here's a TED window. So I applied to Arusha, Tanzania, and they let me in because I was more qualified than an empty chair. And there were like 500 people, the leading thinkers in Africa and from around the world, and it was the most exciting experience of my life. I have to tell you, I was just overwhelmed. I actually wept after 5 days. I mean, there was one speaker who made a rhetorical question, and someone stood up and answered it, arguing with him. This is awesome. And then I realized it was Bono who stood up and started arguing with the speaker. That was even more awesome. And I'm going, I'm in an event where Bono is challenging the speaker. But I'm actually incredibly socially introverted. And one of the most terrifying things in the world for me is to meet people. And so I get to TED, and they lost my luggage. I had no clothes, so it really made me feel kind of awkward. And my daughter Mariah, who's up here, is talking to me on the phone, saying, okay, Dad, we want you to meet people. They walk me in on the phone, my son and my daughter. Okay, walk toward people, make eye contact. Smile, Dad. I am smiling. Don't yell, you look crazy. It's that kind of thing. And I think it was Mariah who actually said, look for someone who looks lonelier than you. And so I'm looking around, okay, who looks lonelier than me? And I thought, no, I'm gonna look for kindness. I thought, I'm gonna look for the kindest person in the room. And I saw this woman, and she looked so kind. And she was a little bit older, and she didn't look like one of those high-powered, intellects or entrepreneurs. She just looked like a really kind person. And so I got in line behind her in the buffet line, and I said, hi, my name's Erwin, and she told me her name, and I said, this is my first TED, and she told me her experience, and I said, hey, would you like to have lunch together? She said, sure, and we sat down at this table. I thought, it's so easy to meet people at TED, this is incredible. And then about 8 people joined us in this round table, almost immediately. And her and I, we talked for the next hour at least, and no one interrupted us. They just listened to us the whole time. And I thought, I am scintillating. These people are just listening to me the whole time. But it wasn't me, it was her. But you ever talk to somebody, no matter what you talk about, they just want to talk about whatever they want to talk about? You know what I'm talking about? You want to talk about the political issue in the Middle East, and they want to talk to you about the Raiders. Let's talk Raider football. And you're like, well, I'm not really doing well in my relationship with my girlfriend. And they go, yeah, the Raiders aren't doing well either. It just, no matter what you're talking about, they're talking about what they want to talk about. Well, she was like that. No matter what I talked about, she just talked about whatever she talked about, because after about an hour, I kept thinking to myself, this woman is kind of fixated with chimpanzees or gorillas, or, they're all the same to me, but not to her, and being corrected multiple times. And then after about an hour, I looked at her and I said, because all she did was I said, well, yeah, I'm really worried about the political situation in China. She goes, chimpanzees have political arrangements, and gorillas have political systems, and I'm just wondering about the ethics. The gorillas have relational ethics, and finally I said, Jane, can I ask you a question? And she goes, what? And I said, are you Jane Goodall? And she said, of course I am. I said, that explains that whole gorilla chimpanzee thing. And every single person I met was like her. They were an expert in a species. I mean, you'd meet the person who marched with the penguins, and you'd meet people who would study the migration of one bee through Central America in the month of October, and then I would go to TED, and they'd say, and I hated it, the dreaded question, what do you do? And I sometimes say I'm a filmmaker, and sometimes I would say I'm a writer, and sometimes I would say I'm a fashion designer. Sometimes I almost never said I'm a pastor, just got to be honest, because like they were like 99% atheists. And to say you're a pastor is like saying, hi, I'm a cannibal, do you want to have lunch? And so, I had to find a nuanced way, around that. And so what I would answer a lot of times is I would say, I do a lot of things, but nothing well. And then they would almost always look back at me and say, oh, you're a writer. Oh, that is why I'm a writer. I do a lot of things, but nothing well, and so I write about it. And because the people who do it well don't have time to write about it, but that leaves an occupation for people like me. And then I came home now I've been a part of TED for like 10 years, and came home and told my wife, I can't go back to TED in this condition. Everybody has a species, but I don't. I mean, it's like going to a potluck without bringing any food. It's just really awkward. You don't feel like you should even be there, and I need a species. But I'm too old to start from scratch, so I need to find a species I've inadvertently learned about. And then it occurred to me that I've been a human almost all of my life. And that I really like humans. They're my favorite species. I mean, I love tigers and penguins, but humans are still number one. And if you're involved in anything related to ministry, if you're involved in the life of this thing we call the church, whether you realize it or not, you're going to become an expert in humanity. You're going to become an expert in human dysfunction, in human neurosis, in human relationships. And eventually, you'll have to not only know a lot about God, but a lot about people. And so I started asking myself, what makes humans different than every other species? Well, what is it that distinguishes us from the platypus and the penguin? And there's this one particular passage of scripture I want to put into your imagination today, to let it incubate, to see what might happen for the future. In Hebrews chapter 11, I want to read the first 3 verses you're familiar with, and I hope today you can hear them in an unfamiliar way. It says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Let's just pause there. Do you ever read the Bible and you actually know it doesn't make any sense, but you pretend it makes sense because it's in the Bible? But if it was anywhere else, you would know it doesn't make sense. You go, that doesn't make any sense, but because it's in the Bible, you just act like it does, but it never makes actually any sense to you at all. That's what that first verse actually is all about. That first verse doesn't make any sense at all. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for. Who has more confidence in what you hope for than what you have? I have a lot more confidence in what I have than what I hope for. I'm more confident in the job I have than the job I hope for. I'm more confident in the car I have than the car I hope for. I'm more confident in the house I have than the house I hope for. I'm always more confident in what I have than what I hope for, because we humans are designed to have more confidence in what we have. But somehow faith, it says now faith is confidence in what we hope for. So whatever this faith thing is, whatever this abstract, ethereal component called faith is, it actually shifts human thought and engagement to now have more confidence in what we hope for than in what we have. And I want you to know that's unusual, at least in the present condition of being human. And then it goes on, and assurance about what we do not see. Who has more assurance in what you do not see than assurance in what you do see? See, I have more assurance in what I do see. See, if you ask me, would you like to sit down, and you show me a chair that I can see, I'll say, yeah, I'll sit in that chair. But if you offer me a chair I can't see, I'm saying, no, you can have that chair. I'll take the one I can see, because I have more assurance. Nothing about you. I trust you, but I don't really have assurance in the chair I can't see. Even if you tell me you can see it, I can't see it. I'm not really sure if you're telling me the truth. And it says that faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance in what we do not see. So immediately, it says something about the human experience that violates everything we know experientially. Because, by the way, hope always exists in the future. Hope never exists in the present. Hope never exists in the past. If your hope is placed in the past, that's called regret. And so if you're going to have confidence in what you hope for, it means you have to have confidence in the space called the future. And if you're going to have assurance of what you cannot see, it means you have to have faith in something that's invisible. And then it goes on to say, and this is what the ancients were commended for. So somehow the ancient humans understood something about the relationship of a human being to the invisible space known as the future and the unknown that we've forgotten. Is it possible that faith is the language that talks about the gap in between who humans were before we lost our relationship with God and who we are now without him? And then it says, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. Why is that important in this particular conversation? Well, why is it important that faith understands that everything's made out of God's command and what is seen was not made of that which is visible? You see, science tells us that everything is created out of something. That's the journey of empirical evidence. And it tells us that everything comes out of something except for that original something comes out of nothing, because if there's nothing, then nothing creates that something, but after that, everything comes out of something. Incredibly scientific. But what we tend to say is, well, yes, everything came out of something, and yes, that something came out of nothing, but that nothing came out of God. He commanded it. It's like Neil, out of nothing. But actually what the scriptures tells us, it's very different. The scriptures actually tell us that everything came out of something, and it looks like something came out of nothing, because that nothing is actually not nothing. It's something, but it's an invisible something that creates the visible something and the visible everything. Are you watching? Are you following me? See, this is important. Because it says, you see, by faith, the ancients understood that everything that is visible comes out of that which is not seen. And it connects it that it's all created out of the command of God. So what does this have to do with us and faith? See, what he's telling us is that we as human beings are created in the image and likeness of God, and we have this unique relationship to God's image, that we are materializers of the invisible. And if we don't understand that God materializes the invisible, he takes that which is invisible, unseen, and turns it into that which is visible and seen. And you, as a human being, have that unique capacity from God. Human beings materialize the invisible. Now, I know that may sound crazy. It may sound heretical. But before you leave here today, I hope you'll at least begin to consider this possibility, that you are designed by God to materialize the invisible. I imagine myself ending on time at 10:18. Even though I did not imagine, I kind of thought that MSC might go a little long. I did kind of imagine that. But I'm gonna imagine I'm gonna end on time. Now let's see if I can actually make that future happen. Because I also imagine that if I go 1 minute long, I see all of you walking out. I imagine that, and I don't want to live that imagination as a reality. See, human beings materialize the invisible. Let's put it in a more tangible language. You take ideas and you turn them into reality. See, human beings are designed by God to dream, to imagine, and to create. And somewhere along the way, we humans try not to violate God's space like you could violate God's space. See, we're afraid to do what God's supposed to do, and we're afraid to try to do what only God does. But I want to be really, really clear with you about something. You can't do what God does. You can only do what God created you to do, or less. And yet you are designed by God to see in your imagination, to see in your dreams that which does not exist, and then turn it into reality. And this means our imagination is our greatest gift, and it's also our greatest curse. Have you ever imagined yourself to be someone you're not, but do not live up to that? See, when you imagine yourself being someone you're not and you do not live up to it, you are filled with guilt and with shame. You can't even experience guilt or shame unless you imagine yourself to be different. When you imagine a life, have you ever imagined a life that you have not yet chosen to live? You are here at this defining moment in your life, this decisive moment in your life. You're choosing one career, but your soul may be saying you want this other career. You're choosing one direction, but deep down inside you long for this other direction. But the one you're choosing is safer, it's more secure, it's more predictable, and you're terrified of the one that's filled with uncertainty and unpredictability because it requires more faith and more courage. But I'm telling you now, early in your journey, if you can imagine a life you never have the courage to try to live, you will live your entire life with regret. You can imagine a world that does not exist. You can imagine a world that we seem powerless to create. But if you do not try to create that world, you will look back with a sense of despair. Human beings imagine what does not exist. And those with courage and intention begin to create their imagination into reality. That visible future that one day will be seen by everyone is an invisible future right now inside of the imagination of a human being. The movement of Jesus, it tells us, is a movement of dreams and visions. Because young men and women will have dreams, and old men and women will have visions, because it all begins here in this space where the unimaginable is imagined and begins to be created into reality. This makes you different than every other species, I'm telling you. This is where we get our angst, our struggles, our despair, our depression. Because you know somehow there's more than you are, more than you have, more than you're living, more than you've seen, more than you know. And it haunts you inside. There's just no water buffalo out there going, I want to be a dancer. I want to dance. I know I don't have the body for it, but I have the legs for it. And there's just no giraffe saying, I'm really good at getting leaves. I want to be an architect. You know? There's no elephant saying, I want to paint, but I have no thumbs. Curse those thumb creatures. See what humans do. Anybody here named Farmer? Carpenter? Taylor? Smith? All right, we have a few Smiths. See, you have those names because somewhere along the way, you were predictive. Somebody's father was a carpenter, someone's son became a carpenter, someone's son became a carpenter, someone's great-great-great-grandfather was a tailor, then someone's son became a tailor, and his son became a tailor, and their son became a tailor. Anybody here named Escobar? It's a different family business, but anyway. Humans have this unusual ability to break the cycle of what has been, to create what has never been before. You can imagine yourself differently because one day a tailor said, I'm not going to be a tailor, I'm going to be a doctor. One day a blacksmith said, I'm not going to be a smith, I'm going to be a writer. Because human beings have this unusual capacity to see what is not seeable and the invisible and the universe inside of them. Have you ever felt trapped? Like you're just a cog in the machine. You sold out to the man, you were trapped inside of the matrix. You've taken the wrong pill, and now you're living inside of the illusion. You're like, I can't believe, what am I doing here in college? Just going to class, punching in, punching out, going through the system, and I've sold out to the man. You ever felt that way? You see, gazelles don't feel that way. Wouldn't it be great if a gazelle got up one day and said, can't you see it? We're all just a part of the system. We get up, we eat grass, we hear the roar, we run. We don't look back. You don't look back. Because some things cannot be unseen. We run, and then we pretend no one's missing. Then we drink water, lose a few more. Watering holes are dangerous, don't go first. Then we eat a little more grass, we go to sleep. Next day, same thing. Wouldn't it be great if a gazelle got up? I'm tapping out. I refuse to conform to the system. I'm done being the hunted. Now I'm the hunter. I'm going after a lion. Who's with me? It would be like a one-day career if you're good at it. Oh, look how he caught that lion. I think a lot about beavers. And I think that your college education would be more enhanced if you thought a little more about beavers as well. Because, see, if you were a beaver, male, female, you would just build dams. That's all you would do all your life. You just build dams, build dams, build dams. But humans are different. But see, if that beaver had the human spirit, there'd be a beaver one day saying, I'm not building dams. Wouldn't it be great if we all went like dam sighting or beaver sighting? And we saw all these beavers building a dam, and this one defiant beaver building a bridge. It's like, he says, I want to be a uniter, not a divider. You can almost like hear it. His father saying, I told you you coddled him, treated him like a gopher, which is like beaver for hipster. And his mother's like, it's just a phase, he's gonna come out of it. And his grandfather doesn't get it. He's like, that's the worst dam I've ever seen. That thing's not gonna hold any water back. And because beavers live by instinct, but humans live by more than instinct and more than intuition. Humans live by imagination. And what's, to me, a powerful reminder is that Nelson Mandela's imagination for almost 30 years inside of a prison was more powerful than all the weapons and all the authority of the government of South Africa that tried to maintain apartheid. His dream was more powerful than a nation. Yeah. You and me were living inside of the imagination of those who've gone before us. And the problem with people who believe in Jesus is we keep saying this, if God wants it to happen, it's going to happen, and God's going to do what he's going to do, but evil men do not wait for God to give them permission to create the world they imagine. And they bring their dark imagination onto humanity's landscape and turn it into the nightmare of many. It's time for Christians to stop passively sitting around pretending the future is disconnected from us. Because you are created by God to imagine a world that only he can imagine clearly. And become the incubator of that future when your passion and your courage and your discipline and your resolve says, enough is enough. I can't just dream this. It must be created. It must be the future that I give my life to. The question isn't, will you create? The question is not, will you create a future? The question is, what kind of world will you create? What kind of future will you leave for those who step into your imagination? You are created by God, different than every other species. Imagined to imagine, created to create. You are designed in the image of likeness of God. And like the ancients of old who were commended for their faith, it is time for us to see what no one else can see, to dream what no one else can dream, to imagine what no one else can imagine. Then by the power of God in us, create into the future a world only Jesus is willing to die for. It's 10:17. I imagine myself giving you 1 minute to be free. Go.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.